colleagues, my name is Sergey Uranov. I'm a senior software testing manager for EPAM. My team is developing VIVIDUS. I'm here today with Anton Prokhorchik, software testing manager for EPAM, and he generated most of requirements for VIVIDUS. And with help of Anton, this tool became probably so convenient to use. And we also have here today Valery Tsinovich, solution architect for EPAM, and he's probably father of VIVIDUS. Today, me and Anton will make an overview of VIVIDUS for you, and in the first part, I will show the main goals and paradigm in creation test scenarios that we pursued when we started development this tool 2 years ago. I will explain why we actually call this VIVIDUS test automation tool rather than framework. Then I will briefly go through the main capabilities and features of VIVIDUS, and after that, we will switch to second part for our session, where Anton will proceed with demo and show you from the user standpoint how to write test cases, how to execute it, analyze results, and troubleshoot failures. So let's switch to the first part. 2 years ago, when we started thinking about our tool, we clearly understood that market and EPAM itself are full of different frameworks and that used on the project. But when we worked on several proposals for our clients, we did not have anything to put into these proposals that will allow us to create test cases from the first day. So many projects are still paying today for creation own test framework. Again and again, it requires significant efforts from test automation engineers to assemble and implement framework before they can actually start creating their first test cases. But clients today do not really want to spend their money for another test framework creation, as well as they don't want to suffer from staffing problems of REST specialists like Python, JS, PHP, or similar skills, and getting delays in delivery with that. So, and what they do really want is very simple thing. They do want to get the application tested, and of course, in a short time and minimal investment, understanding that automation is a key to stable and probably riskless delivery in 6 months and late. So they can't rely on manual testing only. So to deal with all these objectives, we started thinking the tool we are working on should be programming language agnostic, and it should be a tool with already implemented capabilities and features that allows to create test scenarios from the first day. And testers should spend zero time to framework development, keeping focus on application testing. Our tool should be universal enough to be applied for most of the project developed in enterprise and should be used by anyone without special skills. All these statements are also answer the question why VIVIDUS is an automation tool rather than framework. So, first of all, as I mentioned before, a tool is ready for scripting tests right after installation. Tool is generic enough to be applicable for different business domains and not designed for a specific one. It is flexible and configurable for any testing need, and VIVIDUS correspond to all these statements. And to give you some more details, I will probably switch to the main part of my presentation and take a look at the capabilities and features that we have for today. Well, the main ones are expectedly web UI, API, and database testing capabilities, since most of the projects today requires testing these technologies. With these capabilities, we cover probably 70% of our needs our teams are working on. We also included powerful mechanism of visual testing into our tool to get significant savings for test automation of UI applications. For BI and data processing projects, we also have convenient features to test data warehouse and ETL processes, having ability to get data and processes from different API, different kind of databases, data stored in different data and file formats, and so on. Of course, VIVIDUS has stable parallelization and multi-platform mechanism to support, for example, cross-browser testing. VIVIDUS is designed and compatible to use such test clouds as Sauce Labs and some others. It is also designed to be used in CI pipelines, and designed not only means having mechanism of automation launch, but also our reporting model has feature to build trend charts of execution results. And together with known issues feature, it simplifies quality trends analysis, if you wish, and test results triage. All our testing capabilities are free to use at any combination of it. You can create a single scenario that will open that application, go to the necessary part of it, and compare data from UI with ingest received from API or DB. And it's all in one scenario. And to create such scenario, you will need to spend about from 5 to 10 minutes up to installation VIVIDUS on your machine. In addition to that, VIVIDUS also has very important feature required in automation. It is test data generation and transformation mechanism. VIVIDUS also supports data-driven testing approach, and if you wish, or your project business stakeholders are part of your testing process, for them, tester can easily convert tests from from any approach to BDD approach. For example, if you need to create very clear BVT or smoke test that show to everyone who looks into CI after commit what part of application is broken. Well, probably that's briefly it, and let's move on to the second part of our session, where Anton will show you the demo of what I was just talking about. Anton, yep. I'm giving you a word.
Hello, colleagues. So let me, Joseph, could you please make me a presenter so I can share my screen? Okay, I hope you can see it, right? Do you see the registration page?
Yep,
cool.
We see it.
Okay, so yeah, hi all again. As you might already know, my name is Anton. And as Sergey already mentioned, I would like to actually demo the capabilities of VIVIDUS tool based on some real-life example. And in order to do so, I actually didn't come up with a better idea than try to register to our webinar, basically. So I've created several simple tests with which basically do the following. So they navigate to the registration page via a link which was provided in the invitation to this webinar. The test then fills all the required fields here. Try to register. Now the button is named like join webinar because the webinar is already in progress. So once it's registers, it joins the webinar. So that was the idea of the test. And this is how this test actually looks like. Here it is. So yeah. For a potential user of this tool, the like two major steps should be done first. You need to define your properties, which are located here, and your stories. So these are basically two main parts of your test suite. The properties are used to define your environment configuration, your test suite configuration. So basically what, where, and how to run. And they might look like this, for example. So here, I will cover this part a bit later, but here you can define your like batches, what stories, what tests you want, and when you would like to run. The second major part of this is the stories, the actual stories, which are your actual tests. So as you see, the stories consist of scenarios. Scenarios consist of steps, like pretty usual, I believe. The steps are then divided into 3 big groups. Again, that's a given steps, which are usually define some preconditions for your test, like this one, for example, where we open main application page. When steps, which usually reflect some actions that you can perform, like again, wait for something, enter, click on an element on a page. So since we're talking about UI right now, web UI, so the out of the box, VIVIDUS has all the like required actions that you basically need to interact with UI right now. And then steps, which are usually assertions, and I don't think I have one here, but yeah, I can show you in this. Here's the then step in the database, which again I will cover a bit later. So some of the interesting features that I would like to cover here As you can see, VIVIDUS can interact with elements using different locators, like IDs, for example, which are simpler to understand. So again, some classes, for example, or text, like here, you can locate element by certain text. Here, we're just clicking on this register button. You can use case-sensitive or case-insensitive text. You can use some attributes of a certain element, like URL part here, or the most flexible and I guess the most complex for the user, the XPath expressions. You can also utilize it to locate your elements. So this tool supports a big variety of these locators. Another interesting thing to mention, and Sergey has already mentioned it, is actually this adaptive generation feature, as you can see here. So the idea behind that is that in order to extend your test coverage, sometimes you need to generate like almost unique values. And here, the idea was to fill this registration form with somewhat unique data to, again, extend your test coverage. And here we just generate like first name, last name, and some safe email address. These expressions, so to say, they support a lot of different stuff you can generate. Is like not only first name, you can generate addresses, some PIN numbers, names, city names, phone numbers, anything. And another interesting thing is that this expression language actually supports this generated data can be generated in different languages, which allows you to support your localization tests. So in case if you need some localized data, for example. Another interesting thing to mention is variables. So the framework supports different level of variables. The global variables, which are usually defined in properties, like here when we try to select a time zone in the dropdown, the value for this variable is actually defined in the properties file. It can also support variables that are generated within scenarios, within stories. It depends on your needs again. And yeah, the visual check. So as Sergey mentioned, that's one of the features that really helps you to test UI. It's, let's say, very cheap and fast way to test. So the whole idea behind that is that you basically take a screenshot of a page or a certain area of the page or a certain control of the page, put it in a folder, which is usually called baselines. That's your baseline screenshot. It might look like that, for example. And after that, let me collapse this. Yeah. After that, once framework redoes this basically steps, it takes a new screenshot of the same element and compares them automatically. Based on the results, you can again check whether something changed, whether it's okay or not, and that really helps you to understand whether some slight change on the backend somehow affected your UI. Why there are two steps here? So probably some of you already spotted to face this problem. There are some dynamic elements on UI, like some spinners, some videos, some animations and things like that, and sometimes you need to exclude them. Or like here, we excluded the data that we basically provided to these input fields because it's again kind of unique. I will show this in the report a bit later, how it actually looks, but the idea here is that you can, again, exclude certain elements, you can cover them, or even exclude them completely from the page. Also, yeah, there is an interesting change context approach, which allows you basically to focus on a certain element or area of the page. And unless you change this context back to the page or to something else, all steps after this one will interact only within this context. It helps you to interact with similar controls. Like just imagine you have a table with, I don't know, like 20 rows, and each row has this edit button. So in order to avoid steps like when I click on edit button in third row, you can just again switch context or change context to third row and interact within this context. This also allows you to kind of limit the screenshots that you would like to take, as we did here. So we would like to take a screenshot of a certain container. It's the registered one, and here it is. As you see, that not the whole page, but only the part of it. Sometimes, again, it's useful when you don't need to check everything or just a particular thing on the page.
And probably from the test writing perspective, all the X passes after setting context will become much more convenient to use. It's shorter and simple to understand what is going on there.
Yeah, and another thing is you might even not need to use the XPath expression. Sometimes you can use some like simpler locators like text or links or something else, because yeah, it just really helps you to simplify your steps.
Right.
And yeah, and the last scenario here is a bit complicated one, but just to demonstrate you the capabilities of the framework, I created a scenario with several conditional steps. So let me probably explain. So this registration before. So the problem was that before the actual start of the webinar, the registration page returns you a text that says, "Okay, please wait, or the webinar will start in some amount of hours," and it depends on when you actually open it. So in order to kind of check this, I created a conditional step, which basically checks the number of hours that is left to the actual webinar, and depending on this number, performs different steps. So if this number hours to wait is not equal to 0, then we wait for this text to appear. If this number of hours is equal to 0, which is right now, for example, we just take a screenshot. And here I would like to switch to another story with the variables, which covers this data transformation part that Sergey already mentioned. So here we generate several variables that help us to understand whether we kind of achieved the start date or not. The first one basically checks the difference between the start date of the webinar, or start date minus 1 hour, as far as I remember, and the current date. And the second one basically replaces all unnecessary values in this div and returns just a number on. So the number of hours here. And then depending on this value, again, as I mentioned, these variables can be defined on different levels. So this one, for example, is used in following stories. And depending on this value, these steps work. So either we need to check this text or take a screenshot here. And as you can see here, we also use this variable to check how many hours are actually left. So this is like the main story here. As again, Sergey mentioned, sometimes you need to define your steps on a higher level, because you, for example, would like to show them to the business representatives, to your BA, or any like people without technical background. And this stuff might, I mean, at the first like sight might seem pretty complex. You have these strange expressions, XPath, might be a bit complicated. In this case, you can use the composite steps, which Sergey mentioned. Composite steps is a separate, basically, file where you can define another level of abstraction. Basically, you map a certain steps to a composite or step on a higher level, and you can rewrite the same stories in a sleeker way. Let's put it like that. So this story basically does the same as the initial one, but you can see that the wording is simpler, more understandable. And sometimes, again, if, for example, you would like to share this with someone and this someone doesn't really want to dive deeper into the details, sometimes it's enough. It's good to show for to business people. They understand, okay, you can define the steps as you want. The syntax is just like up to you, basically. So you can define
similar
them.
To use cases they are utilizing when they describe some application behavior. So you literally follow their business flows here, and they understand why it's broken if it's broken.
Yeah. So you can define these steps using their language, basically. And it's pretty simple. You can still maintain this stuff on a lower level, on the details, where you change some locators or things like that, and they will just see these generic steps, and that's okay for them, I think. So these are the stories. Now some words about the execution, the actual execution. So as I mentioned, this is defined in properties basically, and framework supports multi-threaded execution, so you can execute several stories in parallel. You can even define certain sequences during your execution using this batches approach, which is, I covered already here. So basically, you define a certain, like, a batch of stories that you would like to execute. You define the location, what stories to execute, and the number of threads that should be used to execute the stories. Here we have two batches. The first one executes this variable story, because this is basically a prerequisite for our web checks, which generates these variables and checks whether we can reach the start date or not. The second one actually executes these two stories, the web story and the web composite story, and it executes them in parallel. And you can, again, create the sequence as you want, basically. You can reuse different stories in different batches, do some dependencies. It depends on the flow. So you can maintain a pretty, like, flat structure of your suite, but at the same time have a pretty complex execution flow somewhere, defined somewhere in properties, like here. That's the execution part. Okay, now I would like to show you the actual report. So here's the report.
Anton, can you just summarize what their actual scenarios you just showed? Just make a quick summary of what happened there, and then switch to report.
Okay, sure. So if I covered it in the beginning, but yeah, so the idea here, we open the registration page, fill this page, fill all the required fields. Then there is a registered page. It says, okay, you are registered. We do a visual check of this page just to check whether it looks okay or not. Here it is, basically, I can show you. Yeah. Then we use this join webinar link. Just click on it and navigate to this join webinar page, where we, depending on the condition, either wait for this, the webinar will start in some hours text, or just make a screenshot of the page. Currently, there will be a screenshot of the page, this one, which says, let's get started, and things like that. So that's the idea behind this story. The web composite does the same, but just is defined on a higher level. So yeah, here's the report. As you can see, I executed like an hour ago or so. It took about 30 seconds to execute, and 7 test cases were executed. That's the Allure. The overview tab contains all the basic information that you need. Again, as I already covered, we have two batches here. The first one with our variable story, the prerequisite, and the second one with the actual checks. And here you can see the trend that Sergey already mentioned. You can so the trend basically shows you the historical data of your executions. It looks like that because I basically intentionally adjusted or like changed the scenarios before executing the final one. So you can see how it might look like in real life, basically. The green one is, again, if you can, I believe you can see it. So yeah, if you hover your mouse, you will see the number of test cases in a certain run, which were failed, which are unknown. I will describe what unknown means a bit later, which are passed. And here you can have, for example, the broken ones. The broken ones means that you have some issues within your steps definition. And as you can see here, that is the latest run where we have 2 failed and 5 passed, basically. So if you would like to go deeper into details and to debug something and to check what actually happened there, you can use the suites tab here. Again, 2 batches, you can organize them in different ways, filter them. I believe you're already familiar with this functionality in general. So yeah, as you can see here, here's our variable story. You can dive deeper into the step details and check what was actually generated. So here it generated the the date difference in a certain format, and then we just replace the unnecessary stuff or the stuff that we don't need to have only number. And since it was executed like, yeah, after 10 o'clock, it basically returns 0, because in hours there is no difference. And we reuse this value later. Here is our web story. Let me just order it by, execution. And here are our visual checks. So as you can see, one of them failed, and I will show you why. So yeah, you can probably, I'm not sure if I can make it a bit larger, but there is a difference in the input dates. As you can see, it is highlighted right now. Yeah. So that's how you can see it in the report, basically. So you compare these two pages, this data differs, you can see the difference. Depending on the difference, it will be highlighted, like it may highlight half of the page, for example. And you can again remove this if you see it right away. You can then accept this new checkpoint screenshot as your new baseline, for example, if you'd like you to, and if these changes are expected. For example, there was some, again, expected change in the functionality, and that this button becomes red, for example. And just accept it, and during the following comparisons, the new screenshot will be used. And here, as I mentioned, we have this functionality that allows you to cover or exclude certain elements. Here we just covered these fields with these black rectangles. So it covers the actual data that we filled and the comparison passes. So there are no differences, everything okay. You can, as I mentioned, even exclude certain elements from the page completely. So basically the VIVIDUS will kind of splice your page into 3 parts, like this one and this one, for example. Take this one out and then glue the rest 2 back. It is useful when you have elements with dynamic height, like, for example, feed on your social media, some tiles, things like that. Sometimes it's really useful. Yeah, another thing which Sergey already mentioned is the known issues functionality. What it actually does, it allows you to map certain failures to already created defects. It is done via a separate JSON file in the framework. And let me actually show you that. Here it is. Yeah, that's again a dummy one, but I believe you get the idea. You can map certain failures in your framework to a certain defects. In this case, if this matches, framework will first use different color for your fail test to be amber, so it's kind of known. And it will also provide the link to your defect here right in the report, which is also useful. This is again very convenient when you have some minor defects which are not going to be fixed like right away. It's convenient for your CI because in case if you have, for example, only passed and known issues, you can consider this test as in general passed. Yeah, it allows you not to spend again time to double check all these things that you know are there and are not fixed for some reasons. This functionality even allows you to check the status of these defects in the tracking tools like Jira, for example. So if the defect is closed, in this case, this fail will have different color. It will be red because the defect is closed, means that someone fixed that. If it happens again, something is not right, you need to check and triage. That's the known issues functionality. As for registered page, again, here, as I mentioned, we do comparison of a certain element of the page, of this registered stuff. As you can see, it just focuses on the container, which contains all this information regarding registration. And here's the join webinar link. As you can see, this one was not really executed, so you can expand it because the value was not was equal to 0. And here you can see the details of this conditional step. We basically again change the context to some element and compared it against the baseline, which is here. So let's get started section. Here is the same story, but with composite steps. You can see it's a bit slicker, I guess, but you still can dive into the details if you want. The report basically contains all this necessary stuff, and in case if you created these high-level steps for business, you can still debug them on really detailed level if you need to. And yeah, basically the steps are the same here. What interesting, you can also have different graphs, charts, trends. This stuff is configurable. So since it was executed locally, it has like the default ones. But I mean, in conjunction with your CI/CD tools, you can configure these things to be to kind of reflect what you need in your current project. And again, trends here. Duration, distribution, things like that, and the overall status. One more neat thing here is the timeline. It basically shows you the timeline of your tests, and in case of multi-threaded executions, this really helps you to find bottlenecks in your test and sometimes even bottlenecks in the application. It allows you to check again where the problem is, debug it then, and potentially change your suite so it executes faster and more efficiently. As you can see here, we basically executed our precondition story, and then 2 stories were executed in parallel. That's the Allure tab. And here I would like also to get back to the ADE and show you other examples of tests. I didn't execute them right now, but as Sergey mentioned, the VIVIDUS tool also supports tests for database. You can see here the simple example where we execute a certain SQL query basically against some database and then check that this data for the SQL query is the same as we defined in this table. You can do different comparisons, different queries. That's really a powerful mechanism. And API, again, pretty simple test, just a head request for Google, but still you can do that. You can also work with the responses on different levels. You can, as I mentioned in the other story, you can transform the responses. You can use JSON path expressions to, for example, extract certain data from these responses and then compare this data with something that you have on UI, for example, so that just to check that UI works correctly, things like that. And a whole lot of different other things, actually. So I believe that's it from my side. That's it for demo part. We can probably proceed to the questions. Sergey, Valery, do you want to add something?
No, it's all clear. Thank you, Anton. Probably yes. We may switch to the question part. So Joseph, you probably will read the questions in the chat and we will answer. So
yes, sure. So the first question is this a scriptless test automation approach?
Hi, everyone. Let me answer this question. So yes, as you can see from the demo, it's completely scriptless, and all the tests and steps are written in test actions language. And these not really BDD as somebody may see. We just follow simple Gherkin syntax like given when then, but we do not follow here clear BDD approach. However, that's possible to write it using absolutely classical BDD approach, but in this particular way, we just use syntax and write our codeless or scriptless test automation, and we provide scenarios, we provide stories, but all these scenarios and stories just the way how we can group our tests and run them. And also that was the answer to the one of the questions regarding is it possible to write the tests using functional approach but not BDD? So this example that you can see now is completely functional approach. Also, you can, I think Anton shown something that contains examples table, and that's way you can apply also data-driven approach. Not really, but in some way, yeah, you can write this table and iterate single scenario against each row in the table. Following this, you can apply different approaches and mix them into single place.
Yeah, and this scenario, as previously showed on the page, Anton, can you show it back, becomes a BDD approach when we wrap up it into the composite steps, and it becomes a typical use case, which is usually written in Jira by product owners. So can you open the composite step down? And from that standpoint, that actually how tester can convert functional approach of writing test to the BDD approach. And if it helpful for the project, if it required, for example, as I mentioned before, when your project stakeholders like product owners or developers wants to become a part of our testing process when they are looking into the continuous integration system. So it will be very simple for them to understand what part of application is broken when it says, for example, that login is broken when on just on the high level, and then you go deeper into a report and triage what actually happens in their login page.
Thank you for your answers. Next question. When I use the baseline step, it always captures different area, which is why the comparison of the screenshots failed. What can be the reason of such behavior?
It actually depends on the scenario. As I mentioned, I mean, to properly answer, we probably need to see the scenario itself, but in general, it might happen due to change context step. So this context is resetted only once you, again, do it via separate step, or once new page is opened or page is refreshed. So if it doesn't happen, there are some single application sites when you click on something, but the page doesn't really change, and that doesn't reset the context, and the framework still trying to focus on the element that does not exist or changed. There are elements with which can be changed dynamically. Again, the sizes, for example, this might be also the reason. So what else? Yeah, these are probably two main ones that I can recall just off the top of my head. But I mean, probably I'm sure. Yeah, if you're aware, we have a support chat for this tool. So if you can share the particular example in this chat, we can probably will be able to help you with it and just debug and say what is the actual reason. Because like just why it takes screenshot from with the different elements is a bit too generic to answer it right now, unfortunately. So please post it in support chat. We'll try to help you, I believe.
Probably, Lena, you know Anton's contacts in Skype, so you can just ask him there. So
Yeah, or just reach me in Skype. I can check it and advise directly.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Next one is from Dima Gumenyuk. Thank you for it's a good one. So I try to pronounce it because it's Russian. So allure, dislike, odpiska. Smile.
Yeah, it's a very funny one. So Dima, like again it because as I mentioned before, we tried and we built a tool actually, and it means that everything should be working out of the box, and we can't create a tool that depend, for example, on some third-party component that need to be deployed on our additional server and took some additional steps at first. And for example, we have clients who just don't have additional server for instance. So for these purposes, just to make this working out of the box, we included Allure and actually included trending information for convenient analyzing trends of the execution results.
Sergey, I'm sorry. For anyone who doesn't know, it was the question from Dmitry Gumenyuk, who is actively promoting Report Portal and who is like Sergey for VIVIDUS, but Dmitry is the same person for Report Portal.
Yeah, and here is a report portal for the VIVIDUS is kind of an extension. The next step when the project is heavily rely on the VIVIDUS and build a lot of automation. So report portal might be a very useful extension of it, especially fifth version with all these intelligent stuff in it. But from the first step, as we require from our tool to get started after installation and have all their features in place, so we utilize the Allure here. It's kind of like you go into their dealer and buy your car. You just can't buy it without some wheels, right? You need wheels to go out of there, and if you wish for some more shiny and better wheels, you can just go to the special dealer with it and bought it after that. So that's probably the answer. So please like it again, and we will talk about some more integration. But by the way, out of the box, VIVIDUS has integration points for the report portal, and some of our projects uses both tools like VIVIDUS and the report portal.
Awesome, thank you for the answer and for the conversation or discussion. Next one, when I click on some elements using XPath, the step fails from time to time, saying the element does not exist, even though it does, and the step clicks on it successfully from time to time. Why it does not work permanently?
That's a tricky one. So as you might already notice, there are some wait steps in this scenario that I showed. That might be one of the reasons that your elements are again shown on the page by some GS or like with some delay. Let me probably even show you that. You can see this spinner wheel, right? Once you open the page. So that's one of the reasons why I had to add this wait step here, because you won't see these controls unless this page is fully loaded. That might be one of the reasons. Again, might be some, again, tricky GS I need to check. Maybe change context steps again. That's really a powerful mechanism, but sometimes when you just forgot to reset it, it messes you up completely. So another thing is that the element might not be actually clickable, or you try to click not the right element. Sometimes it depends on the markup, of course, but sometimes there are like links with buttons within, or buttons with links, or divs with links within which look like buttons, or things like that. So it really depends on the markup. Again, as I mentioned, please reach out to us in support chat, or just ping me directly. We can take a look and say, and probably provide you with like exact answer why it doesn't click. But in my opinion, most likely it's either this element is loaded with some delay or some tricky GS or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Next one, with the two batches, do they run in parallel or one after another?
No, the batches are run sequentially. The stories within a batch are run with the number of threads that you define. So it's either in parallel or again sequentially if you give them just one thread. So the batches are sequential, and that's a deliberate action, let's put it like that. So we can build this execution flow, so execution sequences.
And also I would like to add here that if you run if you start running batches in parallel, then it will be equal to a single batch in parallel stories inside it. So there is no reason to parallel it.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. The next one. If I want to use functional approach, but not use BDD approach, does this framework help?
Yeah, we already answered this one in the beginning.
Yeah, so I mean, the fact that we use given, when, then, or Gherkin style syntax doesn't mean this is really a BDD approach, in my opinion. So yeah,
Okay.
we've already covered that.
Okay, the next one. As I see, there is no place for page object pattern that serves for simplifying locators maintenance. How you solve locator maintenance issue? Do you update UI locators on each story?
So
let me
Valery,
answer
please continue.
this question. Yeah, so probably I will say something which is not everybody can hear now, and maybe not ready can hear, but page objects is not a universal solution. So for people who like using and in test automation more than 10 years and some time ago before, they may recall the pattern which is called test objects repository and some other approaches. So having VIVIDUS, yes, we do not support page object pattern. And regarding maintenance, there are several ways how you can do it. So the first one, you can wrap all your steps that interact with particular elements into composite steps, and then reuse them several times in different scenarios and different stories. Having this, the allocator will be stored only in a single composite step, and if something is changed, then you need to go to this step and change this step. That's it. Also, it is possible to follow test object repository pattern. When you store all your controls and map them to locators in some file or some storage, whatever, in this way you can use, let's say, properties file where you will map the particular key to the locator. And if something is changed, then you will use just keys, like Anton showing now. You will use just keys, and you won't need to change all the locators in all the scenarios and stories. Just go to the test object repository and change the value of the locator for this key. And that's it.
Thank you. The next one. Is there a way to remove low-level information from the stories, such as click by locators?
So I think I've answered before. So you can use composite steps or move these locators outside the stories and follow, let's say, a classical BDD approach, and your stories will look like use cases.
Okay. Do you have experience of integrating reports into report portal? I believe this topic was touched previously, if I'm correct.
Yes, you're correct. We have the module that allows to integrate report portal out of the box.
Okay, cool. The next one, how to make test run in parallel.
So as I already showed, you need to define the number of threads for your test, for your particular batch. Here it is. So we say, okay, take the test from this story demo folder, take tests that comply with this pattern, web something, exclude this web core. Again, you can exclude certain stories if you will, and you just define threads here. Say, okay, 2 threads, we have 2 stories, 2 threads, they will be executed in parallel. And I can probably even launch them to show that. They will probably fail because, again, the webinar is in progress, but let me show you. Just so you don't think I'm kind of misleading you. Okay, that's one browser, and that's the second one. You can see they are executed in parallel. It opened the registers, and the register page. It will now fill all the required fields. Here and here, yeah, see. Now, yeah, it's also select the time zone, Minsk one, just to show you that it can interact with drop-down lists. Okay. Oh, now it will fail because then name of the button changed. So, but I guess I kind of covered this parallel stuff here, so you can see this two parts of Windows.
Okay. And the next one. What are the most common problems your users are facing?
A tough question. It depends on the application area of the framework. Let's put it like that. I would say that the most problematic one is UI automation, and I hope everybody agrees with that. Because with modern UI, with this lot of GS, these frameworks that don't have that have really complicated markup, the markup without clear attributes or IDs, and the markup that is, again, the single page application, things like that. This, in my opinion, are the most common challenges. The questions that were already asked kind of represent that, like why does this stuff doesn't click on this item? That's the problem that you face with modern UI. So these are, in my opinion, most complicated ones. That's why you need some conditional steps. Sometimes you need to wait for something. You need some weird, let's put it like this, scenarios when you kind of drag and drop stuff, you freeze GS or things like that.
Anton, could you also show us on the screen while it's opened the Java docs? Because I see a couple questions about documentation. Probably this part was missed.
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, regarding the Java docs, as Sergey already mentioned, we have the documentation for steps embedded in the tool itself. You can use a Ctrl+Space combination in IDE, and you will see the documentation for a particular step, like what it does, what parameters it accepts. Like here you can also use autocomplete to, again, use. Okay, if you don't memorize the steps wording exactly, you can just use autocomplete feature. Like here, switch to window, so it switches somewhere. Here's the complicated one. Let's open the condition one. So here's the example, like, okay, the condition is true, do something. These are this is our embedded documentation.
Okay, thank you for the answers. The next one, how the test tool works with the Shadow DOM.
So for now, we don't have clear and good steps for this Shadow DOM. And I believe that's mostly because we don't have any clients that follows this approach. So if we decide to add support for it, then I believe we will add some more steps that will work a bit on another level than the current UI steps are working. But in general, if it's really needed to interact in the application with such elements, then it's possible to use very simple so-called action steps. When you says what to do with your mouse and keyboard without binding to particular elements. So having this, it will partially allow you to interact with the Shadow DOM approach.
Thank you for the answer. The next question. In report for no issues, it says status unknown. Why it is unknown if I can get this info from Jira?
I think this was a bug in the trends. I believe the Yevgen spotted the bug, and in general for other parts like suits, scenarios, it's marked as known issue, but for trends it's marked as unknown. So you're welcome, please file a new issue.
It's just filed, Valery. Please fix it.
Good.
The next question, could you show a sample broken test in details?
Broken one.
Yes.
Let's try probably broken. Okay, let me comment that. Let's probably use the fastest one, which is these variables, and let's put something like that. It should be broken, I think. Okay, here's the broken step. Again, collapse this stuff. Yeah, here's the example of a broken step. So you can check the stack trace. It is broken because I didn't follow the template for this state diff date expression. So it is again marked with this broken and this special color, which you saw on the trends before. You can again provide this stuff directly to, again, if you cannot debug it on your side, directly to our guys in support chat, and we can work with that. So here's the example, I believe.
Also, I would like to add that we have differentiation. We have broken steps and we have failed steps. Broken, it means that something is wrong with test itself or VIVIDUS itself. So like this, you provided the data which we are not able to parse. And after the broken steps, the execution of the scenario is stopped. So no other steps are executed. As for failed, it means that there is some issue on the product. So let's say something, some assertion is failed or something like that. And after the fail steps, the execution still goes to the end of the scenario.
Yeah, and while we are answering probably other questions, I will try to create a failed one right now. We have this change in the button name, so give me just several seconds. I will run this just web story. But I believe we can try to answer other questions as well while I'm changing this.
Yeah, right.
Okay, the next one in this case, why do we need known issues JSON and format it manually if we can just annotate test scenario with bug ticket ID? This should be enough for the framework to go and check status.
I will answer this question. So during the implementation of the tool, we also tried this approach, but it wasn't really universal. So you can't map, following this approach that was described in the question, you can't map the issue to particular failure. So if the scenario is failed, then it means that it automatically mapped to this issue. And having this, you can't clearly distinguish between, let's say, two different issues that might be spotted in this scenario. And while that's why we decided to move all our known issues to a separate file. And having this file, you can clearly map a single issue to set of scenarios, to particular steps, and to set of stories. Also, let's say if you found the bug which affects several scenarios and it's reproduced on the particular step. Then you don't need to go through all the scenarios and mark them with a single bug meta, but you can create a new record in the known issues JSON and map it with a regular expression to the failed step. So you will have all of the scenarios automatically mapped with a known issue.
Thank you. Next question. Is there any documentation for VIVIDUS API tests to see some more examples of this?
So Anton is shown Java docs. Also, we have an internal documentation for each plugin. And for now, we are working on the solution where we will publish all this documentation to GitHub pages so everyone can use it. So if the person who is asked this question need to be given the access, please contact me. I will provide the access to the documentation. But for everyone else, let's wait for a week maybe, and we will start providing the documentation on a separate site.
Thank you very much. Everybody's contact will be in the follow-up email, so everybody can contact you after the follow-up email was sent out in a week or something like this. Depends on the recording. So that will be discussed. That can be discussed offline as well. So the next question: could VIVIDUS be integrated with Azure DevOps?
As I understand, the question is about integration into CI. So depending on the way how you organize and work with your tests, there could be several options. But for the people who are trying to adopt the best DevOps practices, I would say yes. And the simple steps would be to build the test artifact, to publish it somewhere, let's say Artifactory, Nexus, whatever. And then in the CI, you need to download it, unpack, and run the embedded SH script. And it will run the tests as you configured them. So basically, this script is CI system agnostic, so it doesn't require or isn't bind to any particular CI system. So the answer is yes.
Thank you. Next question: is it possible to add own custom steps in Java, not composite, and how?
The answer is yes. And I believe that could be the topic of the next webinar, to show the underneath implementation and the extension points of the VIVIDUS. So in general, VIVIDUS is designed to follow plugin-based architecture. And for users who already trying it, they can see that everything which is required to add some new steps, expressions, they need to just add a new plugin to their dependencies. In the same way, it could be done with custom steps. So the developer, test automation engineer should create an own module or plugin, follow developer guidelines, and then embed this plugin module into the test. But if they're interested in details, I could provide it later.
Thank you very much. So we have 10 minutes left from the booking of this webinar session, and we have a lot of questions. So I would like to move forward with some of them, and the rest where we will not have enough time to answer. Those questions will be answered offline, so I can give some connection between the questioner
Yeah,
and
guys,
the
I put it
UI.
into chat our Skype channel to support users. So you all the questions that are not answered on this session, you can just put there, and this link to our Skype group will be also sent out to the all participants by email. So just open the chat, go to webinar control panel, and click the link. You will be there and ask your questions.
Yeah, and just returning back to the question regarding fail steps, here is the example of a fail step. As you might already saw, I just changed the locator to invalid one. The step failed. Here it says that, okay, I tried to find an element, a visible element with this located and didn't find. Stack trace again. Here are the examples, and also a screenshot of a page where the problem happened. So you can clearly see, okay, no, you can see the locator, of course, but yeah, it's just an example. Sometimes when you use some text, for example, or something, you can clearly see, okay, this is just test design issue or something changed, for example. So here it is.
Okay, thank you. The next question. For a test engineer, all that he needs to do is writing the story file.
That's correct. Nothing
Right?
to add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a simple and quick one. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next one, can you please provide an example what cannot be tested via VIVIDUS?
Yeah, this probably interesting one. So first of all, we are not pointed VIVIDUS for desktop application unless it is Electron.js, which is now supported. But for the all the rest technologies, we are not supporting because it's just not like rarely used. For now, we also don't have native mobile application support, but we already working on it, and probably within the first client we will launch this capability because we have all the necessary experience, and we're going to put in the same way create very special steps to write these cases for the mobile application, but it's not there yet. So I suppose in the summer or even a bit earlier it will be implemented. So desktop, mobile, and I don't know, the major ones which is not supported yet.
Thank you. Next one, is VIVIDUS extendable by advanced users? Example, is there a possibility to implement steps with code?
I think it was answered before.
Yeah, one important remark here, the VIVIDUS is absolutely open sourced under Apache license 2.0, so it might be used everywhere for any commercial, non-commercial need, and in the same way it can be extended. So you can put your, you can create your own model and keep it on your side and not to disclose to others, or you can put it into open source following their like coding rules that applies to the VIVIDUS. So free to go.
Okay, thank you. The next question, sorry if this was this has been answered already. I missed the first part. So the question is, what do I need to do if I want to try this tool? Where can I access it? I guess it's in the chat window where you can I mean the Skype channel where you can get information on this. And
so yeah, we'll probably share the GitHub link so you can try it basically, and support chat. Yeah, Sergey already shared.
Yeah, and follow-up email we will also share this link to the VIVIDUS in GitHub. You can find the instruction for installation and so on.
Exactly. So next one, on the main alert page, we see in batch 1 as precondition and batch 2 as main test. Can we rename those labels to reflect the actual roles of those batches?
It is asking one of the developers of VIVIDUS, so Vlad, please don't push on us here. Let's communicate separately.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you. The next one, is there a possibility to maintain a page object structure outside the story files so it is more easy to maintain and avoid locator duplication across story files?
So it was answered before. The short, you can use test objects repository pattern, or you can wrap all locators into composite steps.
Okay. The next one, how many threads could be utilized?
It strongly depends on the infrastructure. So we have tested with 100 threads, parallel threads, and everything was going well. So the number, I mean, you should have capacity. Let's say you want to run 100 browsers, so you should have the equal infrastructure that will allow you to run so many browsers. And also, while you're running tests, you should understand then the more threads you have, the much resources you need. So you need more memory and you need the higher CPU. But so for 100 threads, we had memory consumption about 4 gigabytes. It was a set of web UI tests.
Awesome, thank you. Next one, is there a way to pass variables to the composite test steps?
Yep, it is.
Okay.
I mean, so yeah, it is. It will take some time. So, but yeah, it is.
Cool. Thank you. The next one, what tools are used under the hood for UI and API testing?
So for web UI, we use Selenium because it's popular and it solves many known problems. For API, we use Apache HTTP client to interact on the HTTP level. We use JSON libraries like Jackson, JSON Pass to perform validation, and we use XML unit for XML validations, and also plain Java to run like XSD and schema validations.
Perfect. Thank you for the answer. Does this tool support JavaScript?
Not really clear what question is about. So
Answer probably both from the scripting perspective and from the first of all from the application built on JavaScript.
So from the scripting perspective, it is possible to execute JavaScript. However, we don't recommend to do it because that's not the usual way how the users interact with web applications. But sometimes it could be necessary to run some JavaScript to embed something which is not really actual testing of the application, but the tweak of some conditions of the application to adopt to your needs. So like for now, I can't even imagine what can be done.
For example,
Tableau reporting. We tried with JavaScript to hover on and click on some elements in the JavaScript part of this application, if you remember.
Yeah, and sticky headers and footers were also kind of fixed with the JavaScript, as far as I remember.
And regarding the extension, JavaScript is not supported. Java and all JVM languages are supported here. So you can write your custom plugins using Java, Groovy, Kotlin, whatever is compiled into Java or something similar to that could be run using JVM.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one, is there a particular plugin for IntelliJ to support autocomplete, syntax highlighting, and other suites like you showed using Eclipse? I believe it's not really connected to the tool at the moment, but maybe if you have some hints.
Yeah, for Eclipse, we use an official JBehave plugin, and this plugin provides all these capabilities like syntax highlighting, autocomplete, and etc. There are several plugins for IntelliJ IDE, but they are not really up to date. So they are working only partially and do not provide the same level of flexibility and the same user experience. Also, our team has plans to extend JBehave Eclipse plugin to make it more even user-friendly, because for now, let's say composite steps, syntax highlighting is not really well, working is not really well, and also auto-completion doesn't work for composite steps. And for IntelliJ IDEA, we don't have such plans. If you wish, you can write your own plugin.
Okay, it's also a good one. Next one. Thank you, Sergey, Anton, Valerie, and Joseph. It was really helpful presentation. Thank you very much. In the name of everybody. And the last one. Can we use this to test SSRS reports available in server?
What is SSRS?
To be honest, I don't know.
I just googled it. It says that
SQL Server's metrics report.
So I'm not really aware of this functionality. So we do support relational database, and we also support MongoDB, but I'm not really aware of the SQL Server reporting. I don't. What is it? So we need to dive deep to understand, is it possible to automate using VIVIDUS or not?
Thank you very much. And that was the last question. And we are now really close to the end of this session, in time, I mean. So as there is no other outstanding questions or comments to discuss, I would like to say thank you for everybody for joining, and also for you, Sergey, Valerie, and Anton, for this really cool presentation and for the answers on the questions. There were a lot, so it seems that the topic was really interesting for everybody. Thank you very much. The usual follow-up email will be sent out with the link of the recording and with the presentation as well. Also with other materials, as GitHub repository and Skype link will be included to the follow-up. Thank you very much again, and see you next time on the next webinar. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye.